Hello, everyone. Welcome to Ties, and my name is Hardik, and I will be your host today. So today we have Shrishti with us. Shrishti is joining straight from UK. She is a counterterrorism specialist, a psychologist, and a psychotherapist. So welcome, Shrishti, and we will be having a conversation on psychology of radicalization uh, among youth today. And Shrishti has years of experience in psychology, so she will share some good insights with us, and we can strike a conversation directly with. So, Shrishti, can you talk about your journey into psychology, how you actually was drawn to psychology, and how you actually shaped your experiences later? So,
Amazing. First of all, thank you so much, Thais and Hardik, for having me on this platform. We are truly very grateful. In regards with my journey, I have always been, since I was a kid, very interested in psychology in itself. I did my bachelor's from Australia, and then I was working in the field of PTSD for military and defense there. That's where I think my interest for forensic science really sparked, where I wanted to learn more about forensic and clinical psychology. So, and I wanted to travel a different country. So I moved to UK and I did my other degree in forensic psychology and criminology, where I learned so much about terrorism. I wrote papers about it. And there was one of the papers that I wrote about defense ministry and how recruitment happens when it comes to radicalization in the youth, which was well received by a lot of people, especially the defense ministries in different countries. And since then, I also did some training in counterterrorism in India, as well, to understand more about what terrorism is, what are the effects of it, not just something that's provided on paper. And then also, I did understand, like since I've been living here, that drug and alcohol addiction is something that is very prominent in the youth. And it also is a factor that is also being used in terrorism recruitment. Because of the brain, how the brain reacts to a lot of stimuli, which I will be talking about with you later on. And then, so since then, I have been deeply rooted in psychology, deeply rooted in counterterrorism, have been writing a few different researches as well, and then practicing as a specialist, just being on a platform which is accessible and just being acknowledged in that regard. So, yeah.
that's great. That's great. I live in India, and here a lot of people take psychology. But what I feel, the type of experience that you have in the field, the type of experience that comes with your study about counterterrorism, actually makes it different and takes it to the different level. So I will be striking the conversation directly from here. We will be moving on to the topic of radicalization in youth and understanding the psychology behind it. So, with your experience, can you explain about the word radicalization? What do you think actually, as a psychologist, you understand from word radicalization?
Okay. So look, I want to start by dismantling the most common assumption people bring to this word. Radicalization is not an event. It is not the moment someone picks up a weapon or walks into a police station and confesses to a plot. It is a slow, largely invisible process, one that can take months to years, by which a person's moral universe is systematically rebuilt around the accessibility and acceptability of violence. The best framework we have, and I mean the most empirically tested, is the most cross-culturally validated, is the 3N model by Professor Ari Kruglinski at the University of Maryland. So in 2024, a meta-analysis in the journal Trauma, Violence and Abuse reviewed 42 independent studies across 17 research reports and confirmed what Kruglinski has argued for 2 decades. Radicalization requires 3 things to converge. The first N is the need. Every human being has what psychologists call a quest for significance, the need to matter, to be seen, to have weight in the world. When that need is violated through humiliation, exclusion, civilizational shame, a dangerous void opens up inside a person. The second N is the narrative. Into that void steps an ideology, and not just an ideology, one that does a very specific job. It tells the person who is responsible for their suffering. And it frames violence against that enemy as the noble, even divine path back to dignity and meaning. The third N would be your network. Private belief alone almost never produces violence, and I can promise you that. You need a community, you need a network that
Yes.
validates the narrative,
Yes.
rewards commitments to it, and makes belonging conditional on ideological loyalty. No violent extremist will truly act alone by himself or herself. What this framework rules out is just as important as what it includes. Poverty alone does not radicalize, education alone does not protect, social media alone does not provide terrorists. All three ends need to must converge.
Oh, that's a really great explanation. So I had a question that was planned for earlier, but you gave the answer of that question in this only, and you explained it very beautifully, like how a network, a community, an ideology, a narrative, everything is required to reach the very essence of radicalization, how radicalization takes place. So in your experience, have you dealt with any case of radicalization that actually gave you a lot to study, a ground study, or you can say experience that you can share with us?
Yes, I mean, of course, keeping the confidentiality in mind, but even with a lot of therapies that I've done for patients, right? And a lot of people that I have seen while being in the workforce that I am, radicalization, the radical thought just comes from smallest of thing to the biggest of thing. It surfaces according to the window you have. Now, a person can have, let's say, I had a patient who would just be very radical towards immigrants. Yes. Now, that could be something that would be a personal belief, maybe a need system, like I was talking about, maybe a narrative that the person strongly believes this is what's happening to my country. Now, this doesn't need to be the reality of the situation, but that is what the person strongly believes in. So, for me as a therapist, as someone who was helping him process through these feelings, I had to help him see that what is real and what is an ideology. What is radical, what can be seen as an extremist, and what is actually the reality of situations which might not be that harmful that the person's thinking it is. So I think radicalization is just embedded in society in some manner or fashion, unfortunately, but it depends upon how you open that can of worm, if I'm being very honest. Yeah.
Yeah, I can totally relate what you said, that how radicalization works in individuals. Like there are many individuals we have read case study about. We can actually talk about, if I have read stories about the top, you can say, terrorists that have been in the world, and there has been some story and context to their thing, how they think differently from the people. They think they see reality quite different from what it actually appears. And I guess one of the core examples of what you explained we get from the example of Kasab. When Kasab was captured, the reality was quite different from him, for him. Which the things that were actually in India, the the way he was brainwashed, it made the difference in his approach, what he thought, and what he actually did. So that actually matters. So
That's
I
true.
will be with this. I will be moving to radicalization in South Asia, or particularly India, Pakistan, this region. So, matlab, is there a geographical pattern that we can note in radicalization? Like मेरे को ये पर्सनली लगता है कि साउथ एशिया इज बहुत ज्यादा अफेक्टेड है रेडिकलाइजेशन से, और कहीं ना कहीं मुझे उसका रीजन लगता है जो एक हेट्रेड है, एक रिलीजियस आइडियोलॉजीज है, ये जो पार्टीशन जो हुआ था, उससे जो डिफरेंसेस आए हैं वो कहीं ना कहीं रेडिकलाइजेशन को इस रीजन में बढ़ाते हैं. सो व्हाट डू यू थिंक अबाउट दिस? सो इज this the region where radicalization is highest in world?
I would say that radicalization is a global crisis, like all we have agreed upon. We see far right terrorism driving mass casualty events across North America and Europe. The Sahel has become a Salafi jihadist laboratory. Southeast Asia has mature IS affiliated networks. And I want to be very clear about that but South Asia presents a qualitatively different threat configuration. Not because its people are uniquely susceptible, but because no other region on Earth combines these enabling conditions simultaneously in one theater. Two nuclear armed states with a live territorial dispute, a documented decades-long pattern of one state using non-state militant groups as official strategic policy, a median population age under 30, an enormous pool of identity-seeking young people, and a digital ecosystem being systematically weaponized by transnational jihadist networks with military intelligence backing. But the most underappreciated driver is not demographic, it is ideological, and it traces directly back to 1947. The partition of British India was not an administrative event. It was the violent institutionalization of a metaphysical claim that Hindus and Muslims are irreconcilable civilizational communities who cannot share a policy. That claim, the two-nation theory, was embedded in Pakistan's founding logic. Now, if you look at it that way, it has never been retired. It is maintained not by fringe clerics, but at the highest levels of Pakistan's military establishment. So, for example, in April 2025, weeks before the Pahalgam massacre, Pakistan's Army Chief General Asim Munir publicly evoked the two-nation theory, described Kashmir as Pakistan's jugular vein, and drew explicit civilizational distinctions between Hindu and Muslims. That is not a mosque sermon. That is the sitting commander of a nuclear arms force articulating the theological basis for cross-border violence in public. When attackers at Baisaran Valley administered a religious test before executing Hindu tourists, ordering them to recite the Kalima and killing those who couldn't, they were enacting that 1947 thesis in 2025. Now, if you look at scholar Mark Juergens-Minor work, he gives us the sharpest analytical language for what this is. He distinguishes between political violence, which has instrumental goals and is in principle negotiable, and what he calls cosmic war. In cosmic war, violence is sacramental, not tactical. Victims are not people, they are symbols. The perpetrator is not a criminal, he is a soldier of God. And you cannot negotiate a peace treaty with an ideology whose primary claim is cosmic.
Definitely. Pakistan, like you mentioned about the radicalization in this region, and specifically Pakistan, the ideology that on which Pakistan functions, Asim Munir openly saying about the division, openly calling about the division between Hindus and Muslims in the region. And after that, even their defense minister accepted that we have been the player for US in the region that have waged war against Afghanistan, training mujahids in the region, training them for US, that US actually gets benefit in the region. So they have claimed that we have did it 2 times, and they have claimed it openly. Still, I particularly feel why the world actually ignores it. I don't find a reason for that. Why world actually ignores it, despite this region being one of the most affected ones.
You know, I will add on to that because you do bring a very solid point into this that a lot of people, it would be great if they can see as well, which is that, for example, let's say, just adding on to what you're saying, the 28th July 2025, Operation Mahadev, Indian Army, CRPF and JNK police killed all 3 Pahalgam attackers. Suleiman Shah, the LET mastermind, Hamza Afghani, and Jabran. All 3 confirmed Pakistani national. Their voter IDs were in their pocket, with the Pakistani-made chocolates as well, which was found on their bodies. But Pakistan still denies any involvement. Now, that denial in the face of Pakistani voter cards recovered from the bodies of the attackers tells you everything you need to know about the gap between Pakistan's stated position and operational reality, like you just mentioned.
Yes, definitely. Do you think, what I think, brainwashing is one of the important steps here, and brainwashing has been used by Pakistan through various sources, several youth in Pakistan has been trained over the period. Even several youth from Kashmir actually went to the region and they were trained and radicalized. So, what can you talk about bit about the general modus operandi of these groups and how radicalization functions in these regions?
Yeah. So I would say that firstly, I would like to push back on the word brainwashing first, not because the concept is wrong, but because it implies a single dramatic moment of mental takeover, a flick of a switch. And that is not what happens. What contemporary researchers call it is incremental commitment escalation, a staircase. Each step feels reasonable, each step feels right, each step feels reversible right until the point where it is not. The South Asian variant of this process is particularly dangerous because it fuses physical social manipulation with digital manipulation at a scale and speed that no previous generation of security professionals had to confront. And now let me take you through the stages. So, for example, stage one is identification. And increasingly, this is algorithmic rather than human. AI systems track digital behavior, identify psychological vulnerability markers, and flag potential targets before any human handler makes contact. The recruiter used to need months to face work. The algorithm does it automatically now at a scale in the user's language. Stage two is love bombing. The target is saturated with belonging, purpose, and brotherhood. The extremist community offers something researchers called ideological intensity, the feeling of people being part of something larger than yourself, of finally mattering, of having people who would genuinely die for you, for someone whose significance quest has been activated. This is psychologically very overwhelming. And then comes your stage three, which is ideological immersion. Progressively escalating content dehumanizes the enemy and reframes violence as sacred obligation. Each piece of content makes the next one easier to accept. The world narrows to a binary, the pure and the impure, the believer and the apostate. Then comes your stage four, which is isolation. Moderating relationships, family, secular friends, former colleagues, and progressively the lines are just severed. The extremist networks become the sole surface and sole source of emotional sustenance and identity. At this point, dissent from within becomes psychologically unbearable. And that's when your stage five, which is the task assignment, comes in. Now, this is the final stage in the modus operandi because this is crossing from ideological conviction to operational participation. And here's what the Jamestown Foundation documented about Kashmir's hybrid militants. Many receive a weapon, they carry out a specific assigned attack, and return to their civilian life the same day. No criminal record, no prior anti-state activity, invisible to every traditional profiling system. What makes this modus operandi so effective in its gradualism? No single step is dramatic enough to trigger intervention. By the time the fifth stage is reached, the person is already operationally committed, and you've missed every earlier opportunity to interrupt those processes.
Definitely. And the way you explained brainwashing was something I really liked. The stage wise bifurcation, it was really good, and I guess people will understand it, how it functions, and how it is actually how actually people are, how actually you can say terrorists are able to crack in the mindset of individuals. So that will make very easy for people to understand. I really like that idea. With this, I will be shifting to the third stage of my conversation, or you can say the third stage that I had called. So it is about how this particular process that we have discussed about radicalization, about brainwashing, about terrorism in Pakistan, how this is affecting India and what's happening in India. So we will be discussing about that a bit from here. So in November 2025, we saw an attack near Red Fort, and it was a terrorist attack. And what happened? Something new came out of it. So Dr. Shaheen Saeed was the lead of the doctors module that was running in India, and that actually the investigation agencies actually broke news about it. So मुझे ये बात नहीं समझ में आई कि इतना कोई ट्रेंड हु हैज बीन ट्रेन्ड टू सेव लाइव्स अ डॉक्टर वाई वो एक टेरर सेल रन क्यों कर रहा है. एंड द सेकेंड पार्ट इज कि क्या ये आज while हमें ये चीज लगती है कि एजुकेशन व्हेन वी आर गेटिंग एजुकेटेड एंड गेटिंग एजुकेटेड मींस दैट वी आर मूविंग अवे फ्रॉम रेडिकलाइजेशन. बट ये चीज तो फिर वही प्रूव करी है कि प्रोफेशनल एथिक्स को आप कहीं ना कहीं ले रहे हो, या फिर इफ यू आर बीइंग एजुकेटेड, हाईली एजुकेटेड, डिस्पाइट दैट आप कहीं ना कहीं एक आइडियोलॉजी और रेडिकलाइजेशन से फिर भी बाहर नहीं निकल पा रहे हो. तो व्हाट डू यू थिंक हाउ दिस ऑपरेट्स और हाउ दिस गोज, हाउ दिस थिंग्स?
I feel like your question is very genuine, and it does totally make sense, because this would be the question in the society after the attack as well, that who should we trust now? Because this is just going against everything that we've known. So let me give you the precise, let's run through the facts first, because they are more alarming than any framing. So on 10th of November 2025, a car bomb explodes near the Red Fort, Delhi. Approximately 15 people killed and more than 20 were injured. The suicide bomber, Dr. Umar Un-Nabi, he's 20 years old, approximately a physician, postgraduate from the Government Medical College in Srinagar, working at Al Falah University in Faridabad, Haryana. The network, 25 to 30 members spanning J&K, Haryana, and Delhi. The core group, doctors linked to Jaish-e-Mohammed and Ansar Ghazwat-ul-Hind, an Indian offshoot of Al-Qaeda. Room 13 inside Al Falah University's medical college was used to store explosive components inside a hospital campus on an accredited university campus. 2,900 kgs of ammonium nitrate seized in Faridabad. The plot was hatched in 2023. 2 full years of planning, coordination, and materials accusation before the blast. 11 people arrested as of February 2026, and the NIA was granted a 45-day extension in March 2026 because the investigation is all ongoing. Now comes your psychological question. Why does a doctor do this? The assumption embedded in the question is itself the problem. We believe that a professional ethic, the Hippocratic Oath, years of clinical training, function as a natural immunizing force against extremism. Kruglinski's significance quest theory dismantles that assumption completely. For highly educated individuals, ideology is not experienced as a contradiction to their personal or professional identity. It is intellectualized, rationalized, and compartmentalized. A doctor inside this ideological framework does not see violence as opposing the Hippocratic Oath. They see it as a surgery on a diseased society. The internal logic is still coherent. That is precisely what makes it so dangerous. Professional standing is not a shield against radicalization. For a terrorist network, it is an operational asset, in fact. A doctor moves between institutions without triggering suspicion. A doctor legitimately accesses precursor chemicals. A doctor maintains impeccable social respectability. A doctor's home is never searched. The 2007 Glasgow airport attack, multiple medical professionals directly involved, was the first major global signal that this profile existed and needed to be taken seriously. India received its own definitive case study in November 2025. The Red Fort module is not an anomaly. It's a signal of strategic evolution, terrorist organizations deliberately penetrating professional classes because educated operatives provide greater operational security, more sophisticated logistics, and near total immunity from traditional profiling. This is terrorism growing up. India's counterterrorism posture needs to grow up with it, if I may say.
Definitely. I have drawn a very good conclusion from your answer that a educated terrorist is a, you can say, a more dangerous terrorist, and that is a thing because the person can move freely, the person has brain how to operate, the person has the resource, can create the resources of it, his or her own, and that's how it operates. So that makes the activity of terrorism quite easy and as well as evasive in the society. Like, we can't figure out, we can't just see somebody and tell that the person can be one who is radicalized, or the person can be one who is working in such activity. So that is a very good insight that I have got from the conversation that you have made here. So recently what happened ki MHA recently told that terrorist groups like LET, terrorist groups like TRF, PAFF, which are the friends of LET and JEM, as you mentioned. So these are now shifting their approach, and these are now using anti-fascist and secular slogans online to trigger youth or to gather youth. So does this trick of using the language now actually gets it easier to get the educated youths, and does it get the message to them quite easy, or the does it help them to spread the hate and religious extremism quite easily?
So I would say the name the Resistant Front contains zero Islamic terminology, right? So there is no reference to jihad, to religion, or to Pakistan. That was not an oversight on their front, that was a precision marketing. So TRF, TRF was engineered specifically to resonate with global progressive discourse, indigenous rights, demographic justice, anti-settler colonialism, resistance to deposition. ORF India's 2025 analysis confirmed this is deliberate. CTC West Point September 2025 assessment went further. It identified TRF's rejection of Islamic terminology as a deliberate strategy to evade fatwa scrutiny. Now, Pakistan needed a proxy that could operate without triggering the international sanction designations that come with overt, Lashkar-e-Taiba or the GEM branding. Now, the GWU program on extremism calls what results salad bar extremism. The educated recruit assembles a personal ideological framework from progressive sounding ingredients, so like demographic justice, resistance, anti-colonialism, without realizing that the dish being served is operationally jihadist violence. The rebranding is not aimed at the committed operative. It is aimed at the rational college student who would never join Lashkar-e-Taiba, but might join a resistant movement. Then Pahalgam, the TRF claimed that attack twice on Telegram on 22nd April. 4 days later, they withdrew the claim, citing a coordinated cyber intrusion. Pakistan's Deputy PM Ishaq Dar told Parliament, "We don't consider TRF illegal, show us proof." Pakistan then successfully blocked TRF's mention in a UN Security Council statement that is not improvisation. That is rehearsed geopolitical architecture executed on a schedule. Now, in December 2025, the NIA filed a comprehensive charge sheet formally naming Lashkar-e-Taiba and TRF as responsible for Pahalgam. 7 accused names, including the 3 dead Pakistani attackers and their Pakistani-based handlers. TRF's denials are now a matter of judicial record. Pakistan asked for proof. India filed it in court. The denials continue anyway, which tells you the denials were never really about the evidence.
What I can say about this, what I drew from the conclusion, that it has the terrorism in the region has shifted to a newer domain. Call it the profession, call it the ideology, and it wants to evolve, and it is evolving. And as India, we need to be more uh, careful about it. We need to be, our agencies need to be more vigilant about it. So yes, your point is very right. And recently I was watching Dhurandhar, so I hope you have also watched the part
Yes.
one. So there was a mention of 2001 Parliament attack. It happened on 13th December 2001, and in that mention we can see the terrorists going in Parliament, and actually the car going around the Parliament, and what happened we know about it. But like in that particular movie it was not shown, but when I researched a bit I came to know about how that terrorist activity was actually planned. And there were people like Afzal Guru who were involved in that, and these were the people who were actually helping the terrorist in figuring out the tech, in figuring out the logistics for that terrorist activity. And that happened, and these guys are now called as hybrid militants. In
Yeah.
Kashmir we have a network of OGW. So they work to actually gather information, they work to actually gather everything. And the work of OGW was highlighted at the time of Pulwama attack. A whole network of them was used to carry out the Pulwama attack that happened in Kashmir. So can you talk about it, how these guys are trained, how they are different from full-time fighters, and what's in their head, how they are radicalized and put for the mission?
Okay. So I would say the hybrid militant represents the most consequential evolution in terrorist organizational design in the last decade, let's say. And it is a direct product of the pressure that sustained counterterrorism operations have put on traditional cell structures. When you successfully dismantle visible militant formations, adaptive organizations respond by becoming invisible. The Jamestown Foundation's analysis documented what this looks like in Kashmir since 2020. Most hybrid militants work or study through the day, execute an assigned task, and return to civilian life. Most have zero prior anti-state activity. They don't appear in police databases. They were never on a watch list. Psychologically, the difference from a full-time operative is critical. The hybrid militant has not made the total identity sacrifice that the full immersion in a terrorist network demands. They maintain what psychologists call identity compartmentalization, a mechanism documented in Bandora's moral disengagement framework. The moral weight of their contribution to violence is distributed and diluted across different task roles. So if, for example, it would be, I only managed the communications, I only arranged the safe house, I only transferred the money. No single participant bears the full moral weight of the aggregate. The result is mass murder, executed by individuals who psychologically consider themselves peripheral participants. For educated recruits, the hybrid role revolves the one thing that makes full-time militancy psychologically unattractive. You never have to surrender everything. The career stays, the family stays, the social status, it stays, the public identity stays. Now, Kruglenski's 3N model predicts this precisely. The network satisfies the significance quest through covert participation, without requiring the visible markers of extremism that would trigger surveillance. The hybrid model is not an accident. It is an engineered solution to the problem of detection. And it is extraordinarily effective because the person it produces generally does not look like what we think a terrorist looks like.
Yes. So I have just a question. How actually recently ATS traced that network ISIS is recruiting in India, various agencies are recruiting in India through apps like Discord, Instagram, Telegram. So like you mentioned about these networks, we talked about the networks of OGW, or we talked about the networks of hybrid militants, we talked about even the militants, how they are cast. So how these digital platforms are used for brainwashing now, how it helps in targeting people better, and is this digital platform is actually being used to create all these networks that we talked about, OGW, as well as about hybrid militants.
Okay. I want to be precise about what's happening here, because calling it like, brainwashing or the sophistication of architecture is not what's going on. So brainwashing, like I said, for even the ATS in regards with Discord and Instagram, it implies a passive victim and an active aggressor, right? That's what we all know about brainwashing, that is how the algorithm runs. Now, what these platforms provide is an environment in which radicalization becomes almost architecturally inevitable for a sufficiently vulnerable individual who enters them. So now, for example, the 2025 Frontiers and Political Science paper on AI and radicalization explains the mechanism. These closed servers operate on information monopoly. Only one ideological frame is ever present. They provide social reward for conformity to that frame. They impose exclusion for expressing doubt. And they deliver the psychologically intoxicating experience of being part of an elite, secret, chosen community that possesses truths unavailable to the ordinary people. That architecture sustains itself. It requires no human recruiter to maintain the radicalization loop. Now add the neuroscience to it. The prefrontal cortex, to the part of the brain that governs the risk assessment, your impulse control, your resistance to peer pressure, and long-term consequence evaluation, is not fully developed until the mid-20s. A 2025 paper in Australasian psychiatry confirmed this developmental vulnerability as the primary reason why under 25s are disproportionately represented in violent extremism caseloads globally. Extremist organizations, ISIS in particular, have been described in the academic literature as particularly adept at exploiting adolescents' needs for camaraderie, global significance, and a sense of chosenness. This is not accidental. It is studied. It is deliberately applied. Now, if you look at the numbers, 180,000 plus extremist content items circulating online in Indonesia in 2024 alone. This is the National Counterterrorism Agency reporting it. 9,845 radicalization URLs were blocked by India in 2025 alone. The scale is industrial. We are not dealing with individual recruiters reaching individual young people. We are dealing with an industrialized ideological production and distribution system running at a scale around the clock in every language on platforms that most parents have never ever opened.
Definitely. We recently got a case, if you know about that ATS arrested 4 people in Lucknow, and they were connected. So there were two main recruits, and they recruited people to Signal. So what I feel that by your insights, or what I feel, that's recruiting people, spreading the narratives, or spreading talking about spreading radicalized content, has become something like a good morning messages to a WhatsApp group. It's like these guys are operating with that ease, because of the platforms, because of the tech that we have, that today the world has, and these guys are operating like that, and it makes the process easy. It makes, even I believe it makes the connection of various terrorist group quite easy, because I remember that recently there was a report of Jaish-e-Mohammed being directly in contact with Hamas and operating in connections with Hamas. So I believe with technology, with the emergence of you can say resources, or emergence of digital connectivity, these connections are becoming more and more easier, and we will see more of this in future. So that is a thing. So Indian government, to tackle all this, has brought a Prahar policy, and it has a very high conviction rate. And do you think that actually by putting people in jail, this can stop, or people can change their mindset? Or you can actually see this particular policy being utilized by people as playing like victim card for the same, that we have been put in the jail and something like this happens?
I would say both things can happen, and they happen simultaneously to different population groups. That's the honest answer I can give you. Because, firstly, a factual clarification: the NIA's official year-end statement on 31st December 2025 confirmed a conviction rate of over 92%. That is the verified figure. And Prahar, which was formally launched on the 23rd February 2026, making it India's first comprehensive national counterterrorism policy, is anchored in that legal framework. Now, for the peripheral tier of any network, the fence sitters, the low commitment logistical supporters who still have had other identity anchors they value, a 92+% conviction rate is genuinely meaningful deterrence. They are doing a rational cost-benefit calculation. They have careers, families, futures they care about protecting. The mathematics are frightening. Many will quietly disengage, and Prahar works for this population that matters. For the ideologically committed core, the deterrence logic inverts completely. When prison is reframed as martyrdom, when conviction is reframed as bearing witness for the cause, when the courtroom becomes the stage of cosmic drama in which the state is the villain and the defendant is the hero, a 92% conviction rate becomes perversively a recruitment argument. The system will always destroy us. There is nothing to lose, so act now. A 2026 study in Frontiers in Social Psychology tracking terrorist recidivism across networks in Indonesia found rates exceeding 11% post-imprisonment, precisely because incarceration without ideological interventions does not reverse the significance quest, it intensifies it. Dr. Umar un-Nabi took an oath for self-sacrificial operations. When his associates were arrested, he detonated prematurely rather than retreat. That is not deterrence failing. That is what researchers call entrapped commitment, the psychological state in which dying for the cause has become subjectively cheaper than abandoning it. So the 92% rate is succeeding at incarceration. It is failing at de-radicalization. Those are not the same thing. Prahar names this gap explicitly through its attenuation of radicalization pillar. The doctrine is right. Whether it gets funded and implemented with the same urgency as the pro-secretarial machinery, that is the question India has to answer.
So as you mentioned about Dr. Umar ul-Nabi, so what, like you mentioned that he had a aim and he was very adamant about it, that he didn't backed off despite knowing that the network is being tracked by agencies. So what is the psychology behind it? Because he even recorded a video that went viral justifying suicide, or justifying you can say suicide bombing. So what do you think is the psychology behind it?
I think from my opinion, what I would say is it's climbing up the ladder of that hierarchy that extremism and radicalization holds. So just relaying back to the conversation we had earlier about the three needs that I mentioned. So radicalization is generally based on those three needs, which is network, then the need to belong somewhere, right? Those are the main two ones from the three. Now, if you look at his case, when you are so convinced that you are basically performing a surgery to the deceased society, right? You would be so inclined to do whatever it takes. Now there is no going back. The people, they know, the family knows, right? The society knows. At that state, if he walks out, drops everything, and if he walked out saying, okay, fine, I surrender, the shame, the deniability that the person is carrying in their heart, that psychological defense mechanism, everything is going to break. Now, when that defense mechanism breaks, it's not easy for everyone to go through and face the reality of situations, to accept the fact that, yes, there could be a possibility that I was brainwashed. Oh, there could be a possibility I was not thinking straight. Oh, there could be a possibility maybe there's something that I didn't look at. Now, when you're at that stage where you have to make the call, you would rather be a jihadist, be a suicide bomber, blow yourself up, because that's an easy way out, rather than face all the consequences if you didn't do so. And then also comes the need for belonging. If you don't do what you were supposed to do, where do you belong then? And that question is something that is very triggering to a lot of people coming into radicalization. One of the recruitment facilities, one of the recruitment strategies, in fact, is the need to belong. I've got my brotherhood, I've got my family, I've got the people who understand me. I'm doing something for my religion, for my community. I belong here. If you're not able to do that, then where do you belong? And this question is more of a death sentence to a lot of people than actually understanding that maybe I need to step back and look at the bigger picture.
Yes. Like, I can get that insight. That humiliation is one of the feelings, the belonging, the mindset that has changed, the mindset not to go back. How will the life become? How will the life be? That is the mindset, I guess, that makes the whole change here. Moving ahead, as you have mentioned about that you have worked in drug rehabilitation part, so government of India has been working to dismantle the drug links as well as the terror funding links. So is there a physical physical link between how the brain handles drug addiction as well as handles radicalization? So is there a link? What you can say about it?
So the neurological connection is real and increasingly well evidenced, though it remains critically under-integrated into policy frameworks. Both processes exploit overlapping and motivational circuitry. Addiction hijacks the dopaminergic reward pathways, the system that governs your desire, anticipation, and relief from pain, creating chemical dependency. Radicalization exploits the brain's meaning, making, and significance seeking systems, creating ideological dependency on the network that narrative and the identity brings. Both produce states of subjective liberation while consuming the person. Both manufacture dependence, one through chemistry, one through community. And then what happens is we think that, okay, hum khud se ye choice kar rahe hain. We are doing it by ourselves. Ye hamari choice hai. But what they don't understand is that's not actually your choice. Your brain is now dependent. Now, if you have a drug problem, it's dependent in a chemical manner. And when you are getting radicalized and brainwashed, you are getting dependent on a community manner. There is brainwashing going on still when it comes to radicalization. But the more operationally critical connection is strategic, not neurological. So in J&K and Punjab, the evidence is now unambiguous. Drug trafficking networks and terror funding networks are sharing the same infrastructure, the same Hawala channels, the same cross-border pipelines, the same overground workers. This is not incidental overlap. It is deliberate integration. Drugs sever a dual function as destabilization weapon. They generate revenue for militant organizations while systematically destroying the social infrastructure, family bonds, community trust, economic stability that protects communities against the radicalization. Now, just think that agar ek ladka college se nikla gets into a drug trap, right? Now uski, what drugs does is your brain will shrink, your brain will react in a different manner. वो अपने आप को socially isolate करेंगे, वो not going to have a lot of food, खाना नहीं खाएगा, या फिर also family bond, irritation, agitation, all of this will start happening. Then your depression, mental health kicks in. You will start feeling depressed. When that depression kicks in, उसको लगेगा कि okay, I don't belong anywhere. Nobody understands me. This is all I need. Now, when that happens, that person would be easily manipulated to getting radicalized because The radicalization is offering him the need to belong, the need to be understood. But what they're not understanding is ये pipeline भी radicalization के through ही आई है. So, like I was saying, like a young man who has lost his livelihood, his family relationships, and a sense of future to addiction is precisely the recruitment profile extremist networks are trained to identify. This is something that we really need to understand when we are looking at profiling, to see that what are they looking for when they come and enter a geographical location. What is the population target for them? What are they looking for in a civilization, let's say? The double hit is accurate and is documented. Physical dependency creates the vulnerability. Social isolation caused by addiction removes the moderating relationships that would otherwise buffer against recruitment. Now, if let's say, if a person is under the influence, of course, family relationships break karenge. Parents kya kahenge, parents ke kya aspirations honge, parents ka involvement sab break karega. When that family bond is broken, that individual has nothing to lose anymore in their head because they have already lost that in the gradual process. Now, when that feeling of purpose, the brotherhood, and everything, which used to be a protective shield factor between recruitment and brainwashing, is now gone, the extremist network then offers to restore that belonging and purpose and brotherhood conditionally. That, okay, agar tum ye mere liye karoge, you will get this. Agar tum ja karke ye communication establish kar doge, you are becoming a part of this group. If you're going to do something small, this is what you get. So when narcotics trafficking is functioning as a component of a theater level social destabilization strategy directed by adversarial state actors, treating addiction as a public health issue and terror financing as a security issue is a structural failure of institutional design. The agencies managing these problems need to be sharing data about the same pipeline in the same room. Hard gestures towards this integration, making it real, requires political will and institutional reorganization. People need to understand that it is the same pipeline. It's not two different crimes. They're acting together as one, filling the gaps between each other, and also somehow basically kind of providing an area for functionality of the other two crimes and vice versa.
What I can get from the words, that drug has been one of the things that is that can be used for destabilization activities, and drug is one of the tools that can be used for destabilization. So if this is the case, so I guess drug or a case of drug addict should not only be looked from the perspective of a health issue. It is an issue of national, you can say, importance or national interest, because now what I can figure out from your words is that now I can get to understand why ISI was using drug or drug trafficking through on the borders of Punjab as a tool to actually radicalize Punjab, or you can say it was a method to destabilize Punjab. So this is the insight that I have got from it. So am I correct? Can you talk about this? Is this the thing, and how should the government look to this problem of you can say, to this problem of drug not being a health issue, drug addict not being a health issue, rather being a national issue of national interest?
What I would say is give you an example which might hopefully answer all your questions, which is that, okay, agar mujhe kisi society ko or ek area ko infiltrate karna hoga, if I want to brainwash a public sector, let's say, what is one thing as a tool I can use where I don't have to be face to face with the person, and something that I can implement in the society which will work on its own, something that people will come to again and again, use again and again, understanding the fact that ki kya ho raha hai, and maybe they don't understand ki unki body pe kya hota hai. What does the drug do? What does cocaine do? What does heroin do? What does crack do? Cannabis? Ye sare different drugs jo hain, terror organizations kyun use karte hain? This question is very important for any facility to understand that, is it really a health problem, Or why is it actually surfacing now? You know, because once you put something new, it's a very, in psychology, we learn about this marshmallow theory. अगर छोटे बच्चे के सामने marshmallow का टब रख दो, which the kid doesn't know what that is, the kid will be curious to eat it. The first thing that kid will do is consume it. That is what a drug is for a population. It brings the curiosity out. Now, if you put a drug in a village or in an area you want to infiltrate, the youth will be curious. Maybe jo bade honge, they would be like, no, you know, don't do this, don't do that. But the youth is curiosity led. You know, they would dip into it. What they don't understand is that once you dip into it, a lot of alcohol, a lot of drugs now, they're piped. They are very addictive in nature. And now they're not just like, you won't just get heroin. You can get two drugs, polydrug use. Two drugs combined into one. You can get spice in the market. You can get different kind of drugs that's available. Now, what that drug does to the brain, it makes the brain's network so weak and your judgmental ability gets impacted. That is what a terror organization wants. Once your judgment capability is impacted, you won't be in a situation or a position to make the right and the wrong choice because your brain is impacted, your frontal lobe is impacted. How are you going to make a decision? And then when they come in, and of course there's going to be backlash from the family. पढ़ाई नहीं कर रहे हो, या फिर ये नहीं कर रहे हो, दोस्तों से दूर होना, खाना नहीं खाना, different cheeses, depression onset hona. The person starts isolating, feeling like the person is nothing. And that drug is the only thing that fills that gap for them. That person is now a functioning addict. That is what a terror organization wants, because now A, they're generating finance to get what they want. B, they're also generating their future soldiers who would do what they want to do. Because now the brainwashing is going to be easier to implement because they're going to give them that feeling of safety and belonging that drug has taken away from them. Little did they know that drug has been provided by the organization in itself as a plot. But that is how recruitment in different places, I think, would happen, possibly answering the question that you just asked.
Yes, I can totally agree to that. I have also, like I mentioned, that we mentioned about Dhurandhar. So this particular thing has been also been shown in the part 2 of the movie, how this network operates, how it impacts the brain, how a person sees the reality, and how the reality changes with drug consumption, and how it can actually draw an individual to the stage where the person can be easily radicalized or destabilized. So yes. So with this, I will be moving to the question of Pahalgam attack and Operation Sindoor. So like Pahalgam attack was something, I would say, a different case. I felt it was a different case because in that particular attack, like the people who are not non-Muslim were made to recite verses. If they were able to recite the verses, they were like left, and if they were not, they were killed. So is it still a political violence, or more it has been shifted to sectarian ritual? What is it? Matlab, how can we differ it? Because in earlier activities, we haven't seen such a thing. But here it was a attack, like you can say similar attack to the model of what happened, what Hamas did in Israel. Somewhat like same. So
yeah. I would say it has crossed into something more like a sectarian ritual, personally. And the reason why I say that is that I want to be precise about why the distinction matters, because it has direct consequences for how India and the world should respond. So what happened in Baisaran Valley on the 22nd April 2025, 26 civilians killed, predominantly Hindus, tourists, like you said. Attackers separated the men from the women and the children, ordered them to recite the Kalima, the Islamic declaration of faith. Those who could not were executed at close range. One local Muslim, Said Adil Hussain Shah, was killed trying to stop the attack. The CTC West Point September 2025 analysis was unambiguous. The targeting of Hindus was not incidental, it was the intended message. Mark Jugendmeyer gives us the sharpest analytical language for this. He distinguishes between political violence, which has instrumental goals and is in principle negotiable, and cosmic war, which has sacramental logic and is non-negotiable. In cosmic war, the act of violence is not tactical. It is performative. It is liturgical. The attackers at Pahalgam were not extracting a negotiating position. They were performing a divine sorting, separating the pure from the impure, enacting a theological boundary that traces its lineage directly to the two-nation theory and the unfinished civilizational conquest and the contest of 1947. So administering a religious test before a point-blank execution is not a political violence. It is a ritual killing, and it requires a completely different framework of response. This distinction also has profound implications for the trauma of survivors. So research on identity-targeted violence, where victims are selected for who they are fundamentally, shows qualitatively more severe and more persistent PTSD than survivors of random or circumstantial violence. The Pahalgam massacre did not merely kill 26 people, it told every Hindu in India that their religious identity could mark them for execution on a holiday. That wound does not stay with the survivors, it radiates through the communities and through generations.
I just had one question. Like you mentioned in the talk that before the incident of Pahalgam happened, days before, Asim Munir actually mentioned about difference between Hindus and Muslims, why partition was necessary, and there is a core difference between the two communities. So do you think there was some link between the incident as well as the speech, and how the speech actually derives the very motive for the incident?
Well, in my opinion, I do think there was a motive behind the speech, because it is highly unlikely and it is very coincidental for the speech to happen and then in the same way a ritual to take place. I would not call it a political violence because it does not stand with the definition of political violence. It does stand with a ritualistic killing. So I think there was a kind of a operation in mind, possibly, because otherwise, if you are stating there are only two things that you could do when you're giving a speech like that, where you are distinguishing between Hindus and Muslims in such a public manner, either you are infiltrating the thought of hate into wider population, reinforcing it again and again, or basically putting your stance in public that this is where we go and this is where we stand and this is where something might happen. It can go both the routes. I mean, I'm not personally sure what he was thinking, but what the evidences are, the Pahalgam attack that happened, it kind of, shows the mirror image of what he was saying. Because otherwise, why was Hindus on a closed blank range asked to recite the Kalima? Where was the need to do that? Why was a Hindu can't just be on a holiday in a meadow with the family? Why weren't the kids and the women or even men not spared just on the religious ground? Why was a Muslim man killed on point blank range because he was trying to help? The hatred is not just that, okay, we're just standing for the wrong. The hatred is against the religion. Because if it wasn't so, would you kill a Muslim man who was trying to help? Would you go against your own community? What was the range of doing that? If you are so right in where you stand, why do you have to be so loud in making a movement?
Yes. Definitely, you are right in that. So the response of this particular thing, India responded with the Operation Sindoor, and it changed a lot of things. Policy wise, it changed a lot of things, how we deal with Pakistan. And do you think a retaliatory doctrine like Operation Sindoor can actually change the entry cost for the new recruits in terrorism, or it has actually changed things a lot for Pakistan, or or the terrorist outfits in Pakistan have changed their ways?
I would say that you've identified the fundamental paradox of kinetic counterterrorism. So, and Operation Sindoor is the most vivid illustration of it in modern South Asian security history. The facts first, which I said, is that on the night of 6th to 7th May 2025, India launched Operation Sindoor. Missile and drone strikes on 9 terror infrastructure sites across Pakistan and Pakistan-occupied Kashmir. Now, I would like to reiterate 9 terror infrastructure, not civilians, terror infrastructures that was identified. Now, including the GEM's headquarters in Bahawalpur and Lashkar-e-Taiba's facilities in Murdik. The initial strikes lasted 23 minutes. What followed was a 4-day military conflict, the largest aerial engagement in recent history involving 4th-generation jets, with more than 125 aircraft from both sides were engaged. A ceasefire was reached on 10th May 2025. Carnage, cross-border military action since the 1971 of Bangladesh Liberation War. Now, the effects on recruitment. Both are real. They operate simultaneously on different populations. For fence-sitters and peripheral sympathizers, the entry cost has risen significantly. The era of proxy warfare with complete operational impunity, in which Pakistani-backed groups could attack India from fortified sanctuaries with no risk to their own infrastructure, has demonstrably ended. Joining a GEM or Lashkar-e-Taiba network now means your handler's base in Bahawalpur can be destroyed for a BrahMos supersonic cruise missile, right? For people who are ideologically curious but not yet committed, that calculation changes completely and drastically. For the ideologically committed, Eugen Meyer's cosmic war framework predicts the opposite effect with equal precision. A massive high visibility military response from the perceived oppressor validates the narrative. They strike our soil, they bomb our people, they prove this is exactly the civilizational war we told you was coming. Every strike that can be framed as targeting Muslim communities becomes a recruitment asset. This is not hypothetical. It is documented pattern across every major counterterrorism military operation since 2001. Now, if you look at the 6 months, the gaps between Sindoor in May 2025 and the Red Fort bomb in November 2025, Kashmir militancy had already adapted, rebranding to civilian embedded hybrid cells using indigenous resistance language, deliberately avoiding high visibility attacks that would justify another Sindoor scale response. The CTC West Point September 2025 analysis documents this adaptation in real time. The Stimson Center 4 Days in May analysis, published in June 2025 actually, raises the critical long-term caution. Analysts are skeptical that India's military retaliation will have meaningful deterrent effect on Islamist terrorism over time. Pakistan promoted Asim Munir to Field Marshal after Sindoor, rewarding his military leadership, not signaling restraint. The operational capability that enables Pahalgam, the ideology, the networks, the handlers, the infrastructure remains completely intact. Now, when you look at the kinetic operation that destroys infrastructures, they do not destroy narratives. And it is the narrative, the cosmic war, the significance quest, the Matrodome script, the 1947 wound that has never been allowed to heal, that produces the next cell and the one after that. I would say confidently that Operation Sindoor was necessary. It demonstrated capability. It changed calculations at the margin, but it is not sufficient. And treating it as sufficient would be India's most dangerous strategic error. The upstream ideological battle contesting the narrative on its own, terms in the digital spaces and university rooms where it first takes root, conducted by voices with genuine credibility and theological authority, that battle remains almost entirely unfought. That is where the next decade of this conflict will be won or lost. Not in the air over Bahawalpur, in the minds of 22-year-olds in Faridabad, Shopian, and in Pulwama.
Yes, I can agree to the point that Operation Sindoor was necessary. It has changed a few things, but what I can also add to it, that I personally believe while it has changed something in Pakistan, but I guess it has also, you can say, made the terrorist organizations rethink about their policy to operate, about their evolution, target how they can now target the how they can now target India, and a lot of things, I guess. So I have one last question, and I believe that I should ask you this. So the question is that we actually saw news that, I guess, Hafiz Saeed's wife actually opened a woman cell for terrorist recruitment, and the same cell's lead was one of the terrorists who was involved in the Red Fort attack in India. So that particular person was actually involved in recruiting females from India. So what is this idea about getting females to the industry, and how it actually changes a lot of things?
Well, I would say, like, remember how previously we were having a talk on what kind of factors that we tend to ignore. The way we ignored that, okay, doctors could be used as something like this, keeping in mind the Red Fort attack. Women are in that box as well. If you see a woman going down the street, would you question that the person is having radical thought, or would you question that that person or that woman in itself, she could be a potential terrorist? When you see at profiling and when you put woman, it is very highly unlikely that people's mind would go to a woman being, because of the societal expectations and also the psychological profiling that people think of a woman as. Now, with times, women have more rights. Women are also growing in different areas. Women are learning about different things. They are an asset that is yet to be explored. So when it comes to terror organization, recruiting women is because they understand that, hey, if I need to get a tech guy to do something for me, I can get a woman who is very experienced in tech and would also raise less suspicion for me. It's just about making them understand about how this side of the world works. Now, we all know that women are very emotionally intelligent, but also we are very emotionally functioning. For us, emotions plays a different role. That is how our brains, our hormones, our body reacts to it. Now, if you give something like the need to belong, or if you put that need onto a woman, let's say you take a woman from a background which is very, complicated. She has gone through domestic abuse. She has gone through different kind of traumas in her life. She's broken. She's very in need of emotions and belonging. She probably has no self-esteem. It's in a lot of amount of pain that makes it super difficult for her to engage in any society or any, in her circle. Now, from a terrorist handler's point of view, she is an asset. A, she's skillful. She can do exactly what he wants. B, she's going to raise less suspicion. C, they don't have to implement drugs to make her convinced. All they have to do is go through the emotional route of providing that safe shelter. Then, this is your need of belonging. This is how we can help you. This is what's happening. And a lot of women, when you're already that broken, and be it a woman or a man, when you're that broken, do you really have the capacity to see the right and wrong? Psychologically, you're so overwhelmed, you don't even know what you're having for breakfast the other day. How are you able to know the person speaking to me is telling me the right thing or the wrong thing? Sometimes just getting out of bed is difficult enough. And how many times will mental awareness, bringing in shelters, like you mentioned, they're kind of like a big poster theme that, okay, we're going to work on this rehab. We're going to work on this mental awareness. We're going to take these women in shelter. But this is also can be used as you're putting broken people in one box. They're ready to be recruited. So that is how I think personally the terrorist organizations would see any kind of gender, be it a woman or a man, but especially women, because that's a threshold that not a lot of people look at as being dangerous.
And I personally feel that has been the new thing that the organizations have tapped into. And I guess we will be seeing more from that. So, yes. So, thank you for the conversation. It was really insightful, Shrishti. I would say कि मुझे तो बहुत कुछ समझ में आया कि हाउ रेडिकलाइजेशन से लेके ब्रेन वॉशिंग से लेके नेटवर्क से लेके ये सब चीज़ें काम कैसे करती हैं ओवर द टाइम टेररिज्म इवॉल्व कैसे किया हाउ वी आर विटनेसिंग डिजिटलाइजेशन ऑफ टेररिज्म और ड्रग्स का कैसे कनेक्ट होता है वुमेन का क्या इवॉल्विंग वहाँ पे रोल आने वाला है या किस तरीके से टेररिस्ट ऑर्गेनाइजेशंस फोकस कर रहे हैं तो it has been a very insightful conversation with you. So once again, thank you for joining us, and
Thank you
it
so
is
much for having me.
wonderful.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yes.